The House Oversight and Government Reform Committee will hear from the Fannie and Freddie CEOs and grill them on bonuses for key executives. Congressman Darrell Issa is the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee chairman. And Congressman, I know the way business as usual is in a lot of these institutions, but I don't think either one of these companies have turned a quarterly profit in I don't know how long. I don't understand the pay for. There's no pay for performance here. This is just, you can't even read this with a straight face, can you?
No, you can't. And Joe, clearly they're never going to pay us back the $160 billion that we've given them. These are not like loans you expect to get paid back. The estimate is another $47 or so billion the taxpayers are going to put in to these two failed institutions. If this was Bank of America or Wells Fargo, they'd be prohibited from having these kinds of bonuses. And it's one of the challenges when we ask to see the specifics of these contracts. How were they incentivized in specific? What were the goals, and did they reach them? They gave even our committee sort of a two-page overview of how they thought these people would be compensated, and it had to do more with new loans to underserved and risky areas, not how do you prevent taxpayer loss? And that's the reason we're going to be asking them, not just how did they get these bonuses, but why is it their incentive plan seems to be about business as usual?
Wow, that sounds, I've heard that before too. New loans to maybe to people that couldn't afford houses or risky areas, or maybe didn't measure up to all that. I mean, the government has been in that business for a while, right? Trying to promote ownership on people that probably shouldn't have an ownership.
Absolutely, absolutely. In addition to the bailout that we're dealing with, real bailout, we're not talking about loans, the Fed also bought a lot of their package of loans so that they could, in fact, loan again. Now, we're all for getting the economy going again, for getting the mortgage market functional, but clearly we should not have business as usual going back to what is going to give us a second event if home values don't suddenly rise, and they don't look like they're going to rise. So we have that question, but more importantly, these are taxpayer-owned enterprises.
Who's on the board? Is there a private board, a compensation committee on a board of private people, or is it's not Congress, is it?
Well, we're sort of the board behind the board. They do have a compensation committee. They do act like a 501c corporation mostly. Unfortunately, they operate with your money. You know, we're the stockholders, and I've never seen a set of stockholders less able to be represented by a company than Freddie and Fannie.
Congressman, the devil's advocate point here, at least coming from the regulator, has been that if you don't pay these people, you're not going to get qualified people who are dealing with very complicated instruments, and we could lose even more money. That if you look at the, I don't know, $6 million that could be paid, you could be talking about hundreds of millions of dollars in additional losses. Is there any validity to that argument?
Well, there is some validity, and certainly at the SEC, we pay for analysts significantly more than we pay congressmen or even federal judges. So there is some room to pay more. And if you look at base salaries of $600,000 to $900,000, we get there. It's really these bonuses for performance that didn't happen that concerns us. And more importantly, if you look at the resume of these individuals, and I was a CEO hiring people, some of them came up through this system of being government guaranteed people. So it's not like they have some special parachuted in skills. Some of the highest managers and highest paid are part of the problem for the last 25 years, and yet they're being paid millions of dollars as though these were well-run organizations ever.
Right.
Have you figured out how to wind these things down so we don't even talk about this anymore, Congressman?
Well, we don't think it's going to happen under this president. Certainly new money being put in for new loans that are just as risky aren't going in that direction. But it's one of those things where we have an obligation to do the oversight. We cannot force a wet spaghetti noodle to go in the direction we want. And right now, the president's pushing this in another direction.
This is chump change. I mean, it's bad, and nobody likes to see it happen. It should be paid for performance. But there's still estimates that $160 billion that you talked about. What's the worst case scenario where that could end up if we don't get a grip on it right now? I mean, I see $300 billion, right? Or is that out of the question?
when you have $3 or $4 trillion of capital at risk in loans with people who are still defaulting on an almost constant basis, and there really isn't an eloquent way to get them out of it, our markets are not going up significantly enough to give them equity that they don't have, you have to assume that the estimate of $47 billion more is low. And that's really part of our hearing. Yes, we're concerned about what you call chump change, Joe, but we're also concerned about the taxpayer dollars, and these billions are not on budget, and they are not small dollars. And you know, that's part of what our committee does. As Boone knows, we also care about natural gas. As you know, Boone, we're going to be exporting liquefied natural gas. We have so much of it, and yet we're still burning 51% of our electric is being made with coal. So our committee has to look at all of these and ask the rational question of, is government organized in doing the American people's job, or are we still sort of assuming that we know best and not being held accountable when we're wrong?
Could I comment?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, I know Congressman Issa. He's my congressman in San Diego. But we've talked about some of these things many times. But thank God, no kidding, for Darrell and his group on what they're trying to accomplish. I mean, we're sitting here just pouring more money back into the same thing over and over again. And big mistake. Thanks, Darrell.
Thanks, Boone. Give my best to Madeline.
I will.
What are we going to do? You want to ask about this insider trading?
Yeah, let's do that. Congressman, we've heard an awful lot about insider trading, about not only the congressmen, but also their staffs doing better in terms of their stock portfolios than the average person is. And there's some speculation that that's coming because they know inside information. It's not the SEC's definition of inside information, but they know about legislation that could be coming, about investigations that could be coming. First of all, does that happen? Do you know of trading that takes place based on information or with people who have inside information about things that are going to be happening to companies? And second of all, what do you think about it?
Well, first I have to remind you that my committee looks at the executive branch. We're not allowed to look internally. In other words, we're not a watchdog for members of Congress. We have a separate ethics committee. I am concerned, though, about insider trading. I saw a 60 Minutes report and was appropriately concerned. I do have to mention that these are ethics changes that we do need to put on ourselves. At the same time, I'm also concerned that the Department of Education leaked to hedge funds people that affected the for-profit education market. I'm very, very concerned about countrywide. You know, our investigation has shown that many staffers and members of Congress received favorable loans from Countrywide when it was independent, and ultimately were participated in making laws that were favorable. Many of them put some of this bad debt onto Freddie and Fannie. So although I'm barred from dealing with current members of Congress, I can tell you our committee is very concerned, particularly among staffers who receive favorable loans that you couldn't explain and then help with legislation that put us in this pickle.
So what can Congress do? I mean, aside from being concerned, what can be done to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future?
Well, first of all, I do believe that the ethics committees have to be more active and, once they see wrongdoing, more transparent. Certainly some sort of a bar that all of us, former Speaker Pelosi, Speaker Boehner, myself, would know the clear rules of the road about what we can or can't do. As you know, they said Sunday night, they said, well, these were technically legal. Well, I met with a group of accountants the next day, and they said, well, that's what we advise our clients, is to do things that are technically legal. So we do have to have some clear rules about what is unethical if we're going to have that kind of change, and I support that.
We got no time, but just real quickly, what do you got on, did the Department of Energy tell Solyndra don't lay anybody off till after the midterms? I mean, do you have emails that indicate that?
We have information that this administration has constantly pushed for not losing jobs, maintaining jobs. You know, they sent out to Walmart and lots of other companies, what would happen if you hired X amount more people, as though hiring people creates real opportunity rather than do you need them and how do we find a way for you to need more people because of a robust economy. So we are asking for those documents. They could be slow in coming.
You see how quickly I came up with Department of Energy? Huh?
Yeah.
See,
you know, Joe, that is such a forgettable department that people just don't remember to close it.
Yeah, they think it's already gone. Well, yeah, but the sad thing is there's so many departments you could think of to close. If you can't come up with 3, I mean, Ron Paul's like, there's like 11. Why can't you? Anyway,
Well, Joe, you know, just maybe the next president or this president will keep the promise of reorganization that would consolidate some of these, prevent the duplication. You know, most of Department of Education and Department of Energy, they're going to still go, and Department of Commerce, to make sure I say all three, they're going to go to some other part of government. The question is, are we organized for success, or are we compartmented for inefficiency? And I think the latter is pretty obvious.
Right.
The president and the vice president have both said so.
All right, Congressman, thanks for your time today.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Becky. See you,
do you remember what